Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to wait a few minutes and give folks a chance to log on and join us. Welcome, welcome. Welcome, everyone. We'll just wait a few more moments and give people a chance to join us. All right, I think we are officially going to get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hawk Mountain Sanctuary's Stay at Home Speaker Series. Today's program is Meet Our Farmland Raptors with our very own Aaron Prince, Hawk Mountain's educator and raptor care specialist. Welcome, Aaron.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Thank you for having me tonight.
Thanks, Aaron. My name is Jamie Dawson, and I'm the Director of Education at Hawk Mountain Sanctuary. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this evening. As you may know, Hawk Mountain is the world's very first refuge for birds of prey, and we continue to work hard to be leaders in raptor conservation, science, and education, locally and globally. Hawk Mountain is a private nonprofit, and membership is the lifeblood of our organization. To all of our members out there, thank you so much for your continued support. And if you're joining us today and you're not a member, we hope you consider becoming one in the future. Hawk Mountain also hopes that everyone is remaining safe and healthy, and we are so thrilled that we're able to provide free virtual programming to both our local and global communities. As always, Hawk Mountain always appreciates and depends on donations. Just so everyone is aware, today's program is being recorded. The video will then be accessible on Hawk Mountain's YouTube channel as a continued resource. We also have a link on our website directly connecting you to our YouTube channel. At any point during today's program, viewers may submit their questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom platform. We've designated some time at the end of the program to take some questions from the audience. And we're so excited that Aaron Prince is joining us today to introduce us to some of our fabulous Farmland Raptor ambassadors that are part of Hawk Mountain's education team. But before we do that, I'd like to take a moment to share some of Aaron's very interesting background experience with our audience. Aaron holds a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Ecology, Natural Resource Management, and joined the Hawk Mountain team back in the COVID days of 2020. Aaron spent 10 years working with raptors in an education setting, starting as a volunteer at a wildlife rehabilitation facility in Arizona. He then switched to the zoo setting and worked as first an instructor for the education department at the Phoenix Zoo, where he handled animals as well as developed curricula and led educational workshops. From that position, he switched to the Animal Ambassador Resource Team at the Phoenix Zoo, where he began learning extensively about animal training and operant conditioning with an extremely diverse collection of animals. Aaron has traveled to South Africa to work with local wildlife veterinarians to aid in anti-rhino poaching initiatives, and also participated in surveys for great white sharks in Port Elizabeth. Pretty cool. After that, he worked as a wildlife technician with Arizona State University while doing research on local snake populations. When not at work, Aaron spends time hiking, hanging out with his fiance and his dog, and also he enjoys reading a good comic book. So Aaron, you've had lots of interesting experiences. Yes. And at Hawk Mountain, you have the very important job of being in charge of managing our Raptor Care Center. What is your favorite part of that job?
That's a tough question. There are so many aspects to my job that I just love. I mean, there's nothing like hanging out with the animals and working with them, doing behavior training and then education with these animals. I think if I really had to narrow it down, it would be utilizing our animals for education. There really is something incredible about seeing people really connect with your message while you're working with the animals. That has to be it. I love educating the public and working with these animals to help inspire people to care about wildlife.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And today is all about meeting our farmland raptors. And I just want to make sure that everyone in the audience is on the same page. So would you mind sharing a bit, when we use the term farmland raptors, what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So farmland raptors are a very cool group of raptors. And when you think of them, it's not just owls, it's not just hawks, it's not just falcons. We have some representation from quite a few different clades of raptors. Farmland raptors are those who are associated heavily and are specialists for farmland settings. So think like grasslands, meadowlands, agriculture lands. We have 4 species that we do look at and consider our farmland raptors. Fortunately, 2 of which you're going to meet tonight. But these 4 species are going to be our barn owl, our American kestrel, the short-eared owl, and then the northern harriers, which all are incredibly amazing species out in the wild and are a very important species for our farmers and populations of wildlife in Pennsylvania.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. All right, ladies and gentlemen, get ready for a treat. You're about to meet 2 of our farmland raptor species that are education ambassadors at Hawk Mountain. And then after Aaron's raptor presentations, then I will talk to you all a little bit more specifically about Hawk Mountain's Farmland Raptor Project and how you can be involved. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Aaron. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you. So give me just one moment as I get some of these animals out and in camera and in focus. But yeah, I have 2 individuals here with me tonight that are going to hang out with us for a little bit, and feel free to think of any questions you might have about these birds or about whatever I do or about the Farmland Raptor Project. And we're going to go kind of smaller to bigger tonight. So our first guest happens to be actually one of our smallest raptors here in Pennsylvania and even in the United States. So this first little man that is coming up is one of our American kestrel falcons. So this happens to be the smallest falcon in North America, not the smallest raptor, however. There are several owl species that come very, very, very small. So this little man, though, he is our smallest falcon. There's only one other falcon in the world that's smaller than him, but they're found all the way over in portions of Africa. But these animals, they get mistaken as mourning doves quite a bit. Now, it might seem kind of strange to think of something like a falcon being mistaken as a mourning dove, but they're roughly the same size. They have these really long, narrow tails. I don't know if you can all see that. He's currently looking at some of our taxidermied owls over on our fireplace, just off camera. So he's like, I don't know if those things are alive or not. They are still prey species to several different animals out in the wild. They have a pretty rough life because they are so small. So many, many, many things will hunt them. And when you think of Pennsylvania, we get things like great horned owls might go after them. Other falcons might even go after these animals because something like the merlin is much larger than the American kestrel falcon. Peregrines would go after them. And if you think more terrestrial animals as well, things like bobcats, coyotes, even house cats can pose a threat to our American kestrel falcons. So, and being small has some advantages where you can really find and cultivate areas for your nest a little bit easier than larger birds, but it has its disadvantages as well. That most of which is just being hunted and being kind of on the menu for a lot of animals. That is a big challenge that we see for this little farmland raptor. When he's out and about, though, they love fields. These animals, though they don't only hunt insects, they primarily eat a lot of insects. So anywhere where there's a lot of grasslands, anywhere where there's a lot of large lands that would host quite a few different species of grasshoppers, locusts, is where you're going to find a lot of our American kestrel falcons. Now, they are going to go after larger prey as well. They will go after songbirds. They even try to go after things that are much larger than themselves. I know that they have been seen trying to go after pigeons and mourning doves, which are actually larger than they are. So their eyes are a little bit bigger than their stomachs in many, many cases there, but they are quite ferocious little hunters. And when they're out and about trying to get their food, you can really see a difference in the longevity and the health of crops if you have several kestrels present. You'll see a lot less damage to your crops. Think of them almost as a natural pesticide for those crops out in your field or for that grass out in the meadow. So they really do help keep those insect populations at a much, much smaller level so that our plant life has a chance to really grow and support a pretty biodiverse area. Now, a couple cool things about our little kestrels specifically, I'll bring them a little bit closer here. So we know these animals are primarily hunting in the daytime. And one thing that gives that away, of course, he's going to look away as I'm trying to point it out. If you see this stripe coming down from kind of what we would think of the tear duct all the way down past the beak to kind of where his chin is at, this is what's called a malar stripe. And you have probably seen something similar to this, whether you've noticed it or not. If I have any sports fans out there, you'd know that many football players and a lot of college or soccer players, they will use the black paint under their eyes to help absorb light from stadium lights. That does the same thing, just getting comfy there, for these animals. So while he's out and about hunting, he has very sensitive eyes. He's able to not worry about the glare from the sun coming up and causing him to miss food that he might not see if he didn't have perfect vision. Their vision is pretty incredible. When these guys are looking for their prey, they can actually focus in on 3 different things at once. So when you are watching him bob his head, he's actually positioning his eyes, he's resetting those eyes to focus in on one thing. And because they're able to focus on so many different moving things at the same time, that allows them to really figure out the distance between him and his food incredibly accurately. So these animals will utilize a hunting technique called dive bombing, where they will go up above their prey, swoop down, they'll kind of put their wings away. You can see his wings tucked very, very neatly up against his body. He's got very long, angular, crescent-shaped wings when they're out. And he will go into a dive bomb to grab his food quickly. Now, things like the peregrine falcon, these animals can go at speeds of over 240 miles an hour. Our kestrels, however, they're not going to be going quite that fast. They just don't have the body mass to hit those speeds. They will, however, hit speeds of around 60 miles an hour when they go into their dive bombs. So still a very, very impressive speed for such a small animal. And when they're out hunting, a lot of times, as soon as they lose some of those thermals and some of the updrafts from the morning and the day, they'll call it a night. And they will call several different things their home for the night. These animals are cavity nesters. So when they're trying to find their nest, they don't really form one. They kind of look for places that other animals might have used before. So think like our woodpeckers, they'll use those, squirrels, they'll help hollow out trees. All different kinds of cavities are going to be what these animals are going to go for. They have been known to use man-made structures as well. So you can see them going into things like abandoned warehouses, silos, barns. However, if there's a barn owl in that area, a lot of times they don't want to deal with that. And they will find another place. One thing that Hawk Mountain has been doing since the 50s is erecting kestrel nest boxes. So you can actually create a little nest box for a kestrel in hopes of giving them a place to nest, which is a really incredible thing to do because unfortunately, like many of our farmland raptors, these animals are actually, their populations are declining. There's a few different reasons that we're seeing this. One reason is that things like other larger hawks that eat birds are becoming more and more prevalent. So things like the sharp-shinned hawk, this animal is becoming more and more prevalent as the years go on. They will hunt kestrels quite a bit. So as we get more predators, we see less prey, and then we kind of have a bit of a lag time. So if their populations continue to drop, then we'll start to see less and less sharp-shinned hawks potentially. Another reason that we see these animals kind of disappearing is they have some pretty big needs for space when they're trying to hunt their food and get all the food that they might need for their young and for themselves to be able to survive and rear children effectively. So when we see these spaces being used for other things, so if you have a farmland or if you have grassland, these areas, they're used quite heavily to transition into something like the suburbs. So if you think about it, if you have a farmer in your area who has tended a field and hundreds of acres of land, and they are getting older, they don't want to deal with it, they sell this land off potentially to developers. They then construct things like suburbs. A lot of time, once we have infrastructure on the land, we really never see that land reverting back to a grassland or a farmland or a meadow or things like that. Mowing practices also can inhibit these animals from breeding successfully, because if you have a lot of land and you mow it down quite a bit, that can lose some of that shelter for things like the insects that these animals will eat. It also can really stunt the biodiversity in the area. So when these different populations of plants are trying to grow and they get mowed, a lot of times the first successors of that event are going to be weeds, things like that, that might not be as palatable for those insects. So these animals, they really don't like mowed grasslands just because they really don't provide a very good host for their prey species. So something you can do if you have quite a bit of acreages is you can actually set aside plots of it to be unmowed or mowed once every 3 years to allow for suitable habitat for our kestrels. They really don't like using heavily wooded areas just because they're not really designed to hunt in dense forests because of how quickly they have to drop down on some of their prey. Now, when you are paying attention to your bird feeders, things like that, you might have kestrels hanging around, but right now we've kind of seen a lot of our kestrels migrate out of Pennsylvania. These animals, if they do migrate, will typically go down to about Florida. If they can find a spot in Florida, they will stop there. If they cannot, they will continue along the coastline into Texas and then down into South America. But some populations don't migrate. It just kind of depends on a few things. One, if it's a resident kestrel and they have established a population and established a territory in an area, and they have all the food and the shelter that they need through the winter, they really don't need to go anywhere. But if it's an animal that is leaving its nest site because the parents have then kicked it out of the nest site, they might need to find and establish a nesting site before the winter sets in. And if they cannot do that, then they choose to migrate down into, again, the Florida area down south where it stays a little bit warmer year round. Or if not there, then they will go and make their way around the coast and the Gulf and into South America. And now most of our falcons kind of have left for the season, but we will see them back again in the spring. And if you're hoping to get kestrels breeding in your areas and you're wondering when should I get a nest box up, typically their mating season is in spring into early summer. So think like beginning of April into mid-May is when these animals try to find their mate and try to have their young hatching for their season. So compared to some animals, they do have a later breeding and nesting time than most, but if there are plenty of bugs in the summer, that's a good time to be able to get your young up and going, especially for the males, because for the most part, especially within the first 2 weeks of these animals' lives, the males are going to be doing all of the hunting. After about 2 weeks or so, when the young don't need mom to incubate them as much and they can kind of thermoregulate on their own, they're able to have mom go out and do some hunting as well. And at that point, it'll be another few weeks, and then the young will start kind of peeking out of those nest boxes or cavities and kind of trying their wings out and flying. So it's pretty cool to watch if these guys end up rearing near you. They're very entertaining, very vocal animals as well. A lot of times, you have kestrels around not by seeing them, but by listening for them. Their call is a very high-pitched clee, clee, clee noise. So they have very distinct alarm calls as well. So very, very, very vocal animals. A little bit about this kestrel in particular. This is a male kestrel. You are able to tell the difference between the males and the females by their coloration, which is pretty uncommon. It's called sexual dimorphism. And when you see the males, they have these nice gray or slate blue wings. That coloration is called blue. Only the males will have that color on the wings. The females typically are more cryptically colored and have stripes and striations on their wings that are tan, white, and a little bit of brown. The males also have this a little bit more coppery tail that has a thick black band at the end and a little white tip at the end there. The females, again, they're going to have striations all the way down their tail feathers. So very, very different looking birds. And not many raptors you're able to do this with. The only other example that I can think of here in the United States are the northern harriers, where again, the males have that nice gray coloration to them, and the females tend to have more browns and try to blend in a little bit better. The thought of why we see this pattern is a lot of times mom does a lot of the child rearing. So if the kids are going to stick with one of the parents, it's better to stick with the one that attracts less attention. The males like to be a little bit flashier to show off to the girls, so they're going to attract attention from other animals as well. So it's a thought of hopefully our young doesn't get hunted while we're out and about. But this young man is still quite young. He is only about 2 years old right now. In captivity, we can see these animals living into their tens, hopefully into their mid-teens with good care. Out in the wild, however, about 5 to 7 years is an average lifespan. Again, it's very, very rough being a very small animal in the wild because still many things will go after and eat you. So it helps to have a little bit of size to you to be able to defend yourself a little bit better. And he is with us because he's what we call an imprinted bird. So this animal never learned from his parents how to properly be a falcon. For the most part, humans interacted as his parents, and he is quite comfortable around people, large audiences, things like that too. He would not be able to survive in the wild because he didn't get those hunting instincts from mom and dad when he was young. So he is a non-releasable bird, even though he is fully flighted. He just would not be able to get his own food out in the wild. Now, I'll let you all admire him a little bit longer, and then we can move along to our next farmland raptor. But again, keep your eye out. If you're south of us, you might still have a chance to see an American kestrel out in the wild. But for the most part, if they're a migrating species, these animals are trying to get to warmer areas. So the next time you'll be able to see kestrels is going to be in the spring months when they come back for their breeding season. All right, so I will get this little guy away and I will get our next animal out. So if you give me just one moment, I'll transition to our next bird. So like I mentioned, our next animal is a little bit larger than our first one, and one that many people actually don't get to see out in the wild. So it's a bit of a treat to be able to see one of these animals up close and interact with them as up close as well. So our next animal, again, a Farmland Raptor. Very cool species. You usually will only see these animals at night, so that might give a little bit away of what this might be. All right, so coming out right now is, I'll bring him over in front of the camera again, a really stunning animal. So this is one of our barn owls. Again, these animals are very highly associated with our farmlands. These animals are definitely a grassland specialist. They love hanging out near any sort of farm area, especially because of their tendency to nest in the abandoned barns, grain silos, any sort of man-made structure. As long as there's not a lot of activity in it, you have a good chance of seeing a barn owl. Now, these owls, they have quite a few different names out in the world. You might hear people call them the heart-shaped or heart-faced owl, the ghost owl, or the monkey-faced owl. All of those reference a barn owl. So these animals have an enormous range. you can find a barn owl in pretty much every single continent except Antarctica. So you can find one here, you can find one down in South America, over in Europe, over Asia. These animals are very, very well adapted to be able to find their favorite type of food, which are rodents. These animals, you can consider them pretty much rodentivores. We like to call them rodent specialists because anywhere where they're found, their main part of their diet is going to be a species of rodent. Where a lot of animals that are generalist species, they'll eat quite a few different things. So if you think of like a great horned owl, if you keep it in the owl world, they're going to eat things like mice, they're going to eat rat, they're going to eat skunks, they're going to eat potentially even snakes. These animals, if there are heavy rodent populations around, pretty much 95% of their diet is going to be made up by rodents. The thing where it gets a little tricky is that when the rodents become less and less available, they will switch over to other food sources. So we call them a specialist up until when they're not. So that might sound strange, but there are some specialist animals out there that will simply not survive if their food source runs out, but there is another food source that could probably sustain them. So these animals are generalist species enough to say, you know what, I don't have any voles, I don't have any rodents near me. I guess I'll start eating some insects. I guess I'll start eating some small songbirds. They're even known to go after bats. So these animals are incredible at hunting. They have an incredible success rate for their hunts, and that's for a few different reasons. Our barn owls happen to have some of the best hearing of any animal in the world. They actually have the best hearing of any animal that humans have studied. So of all of the animals that we have done research on, the barn owls are known to have the best hearing out of all of them. They have really, really cool ears. You can actually see right behind their eyes in their skulls if you peel back some of their feathers. Now, an important part about how they listen is this facial disc. So if you can all see, he's going to kind of look at me or even turn his back to the camera. But he has a pretty defined facial disc here, and that would be the area right around his face where you can see all of that dark lining that kind of encapsulates his eyes, beak area, and nose. And that area itself is used for catching sound. So those feathers are actually quite a bit coarser, and think of them like a satellite dish. So a satellite dish, its job is to widen the range a signal can be picked up so it can take that signal back to the antenna of the satellite dish. So if we think of the facial disc as a satellite dish and his ears as the antenna, anywhere a sound wave will hit his facial disc, it will take it back to his ears. And they're actually a little bit misplaced compared to our symmetrical ears. So his left ear is up here, his right ear is down here. Now, what this does is this allows him to figure out where animals are in a kind of y-axis scale. So if something hits his left ear first, he knows it's above him. If something hits his right ear first, he'll then know it's below him. Then when he's really, really, really trying to listen to something, they actually shake their heads back and forth. It looks like they're saying no over and over and over again. What that's called is triangulation. So he will slowly make those turns smaller and smaller and smaller until he has a pretty much crystal clear idea of exactly where that food is making noise. So they have such a high success rate for their food because even when there is no light whatsoever, because our owls, they only need a little bit of starlight to be able to perceive their environment, kind of how we see our environment during the daytime. But if there's none whatsoever, let's say it's a very cloudy, stormy night, he can simply find his food by listening to it. Scientists kind of studied this. They said, okay, well, how successful are they? And they found that over 90% of the time in a completely pitch black room, the barn owl was still able to capture its prey. So they have this incredibly acute sense of hearing and very powerful night vision. Their night vision is thought to be 30 times more powerful than ours is. And again, like I mentioned, they just need a little bit of starlight to be able to see exactly what they need to find their food. Now, these animals sadly are one of our species of most concern here in Pennsylvania. One of the biggest reasons is we just do not know a lot about our barn owls. Not a lot of studies have been going on about barn owls. One big reason is it's difficult to study them. We have to be out and about during night. Most people are not nocturnal creatures, and they're very difficult to find because they're quite secretive. They'll utilize very dense and cave areas and very dense forests and cave areas to make their homes. So when they go out to hunt, might not be exactly where they're found. So they're very difficult to capture in net, and they're very cautious as a species. And it's a very difficult time to stay up all night to try to study our barn owls. Not to say that we don't need that research. We absolutely could use more information on our barn owl species, because very, very little is known if these animals actually migrate. I could not tell you that these animals do not migrate or do migrate. So it would be very helpful for us to know, do these animals hang out here year round? Are they a species that's going to leave the United States? Should we consider putting them on the Migratory Bird Treaty Act on more countries? We just don't have that information, sadly. These animals are incredibly important in farmland areas. I mentioned our kestrels. They love to eat the bugs, the grasshoppers. They were that natural pesticide to keep a lot of those bugs away from crops. Our barn owls, you can think of them as our natural rodenticides, so things that kill rodents. When these animals take refuge on a farmland or grassland area, in one breeding season, a family of barn owls can eat over 3,000 mice in just a season. So if you think about that in damages or crop loss and the value of that, there was a study done in Israel that estimated that having a family of barn owls can save you $30 per acre or hectare of land, which is roughly 2.5 acres of land. So these animals help with crop growth. They help with plant life growth because they really help cut down on all of those rodent species. And again, this can be attributed to our barn owls pretty much solely eating rodents when they're out finding their food. Their breeding habits are quite interesting. They don't actually have a true breeding season. They don't live a very long time in the wild. It's thought that these animals, and based on banding and information, these animals roughly live right around 2 years. That's been the average lifespan that's been seen for our barn owls. And you might be wondering, well, that's a pretty big owl species. What things would go after a barn owl? They still do have predators. You know, a great horned owl is a pretty ferocious animal out in the wild. They are known to hunt things even to the size of red-tailed hawks. So a great horned owl may go after a barn owl and take over the area that it is hunting in. So these animals still have those predators. Land usage change is another huge one. Like I mentioned for our American kestrel falcons, if these animals don't have farmlands and they don't have grasslands and they don't have meadowlands, they don't respond very well to dense forests or heavily urbanized areas. So if they run out of habitat and they don't have enough habitat for them and their young, they will simply leave that area or they will not be able to make it. Another problem that we see with our barn owls is they have incredibly long wings compared to their body. They have, I believe it's the second largest wing to body ratio of the raptors we see here in North America. So these animals have a very buoyant kind of flight pattern. It almost just looks like they're floating there. And they prefer to just hover right about car height. Now, that can be a very big problem if they're hanging around by the sides of the road, where some birds of prey will hang out much higher than many vehicles. These animals kind of hover right at car height or vehicle height. So road and vehicle collisions are very, very, very common for our barn owl species. And that is, again, attributed to, one, there's a lot of food right by the roads, and two, these animals are going to be hovering right around the windshield of a car. So if you're driving down the side of a road in the middle of the night, you might not have enough time to course correct when there's a barn owl going right in front of you. So these animals, they do love the sides of the roads I mentioned because there's a lot of food there. You might be wondering, well, why would rodents like hanging about out by the roadside? One thing that we see a lot of times with some farming practices is if we get farmers that do monotypic farming, so just farming one single plant over and over and over again, that causes a lot of loss of biodiversity in the soil and in the plant life. So not as many insects are going to be around, so not as many rodents are going to be around, so not as many barn owls are going to be around. If you're near the roadside, usually farming activities don't abut themselves right to the road, so you can see a lot more biodiversity and plant life actually right by the roadside because you get a lot of water runoff there, so it's very well irrigated areas. And normally we don't have a lot of people walking right along the side of the road. So that is an increase in biodiversity. And the second one is usually where there's people, unfortunately, usually there's trash. So if you've ever been driving down the side of the road and thought, oh, I've got an apple core, I'll toss it out my window onto the side of the road, it'll biodegrade, no problem. That is true, it will biodegrade, but part of that process are other animals breaking down that apple core more and more. So an apple core is a pretty good meal for something like a mouse. If you continue to have apple cores, banana peels, organic material being tossed out the side of the windows of cars on the side of the road, that's going to be a big area for our rodent species to go to. So once you bring a lot of that food next to the road, then again, you're going to get a lot of our barn owls and other raptors. So I mentioned before with our kestrels, you can see a lot of this was habitat loss for our barn owls. A lot of it can be equated to habitat loss and vehicle collisions. That is a very common occurrence of loss of barn owls in the area. But when they're out and about in a healthy habitat, they potentially can live there for a couple of years. They do like to hang around the same areas that they have established a nesting site in. Again, these are secondary cavity nesters. So that means they're looking for a cavity that's already been built. They don't really have the equipment to build a cavity for themselves, so they need something that someone else has used. And a lot of times, again, this is a big animal, they look for those structures, those man-made structures. So they look for barns, they look for silos, they look for warehouses, anything that they can have at least 3 walls around them. That really helps them survive through the cold winter months. When these animals are out and about, if you think you see a barn owl, a lot of times people identify owls by listening to their hoots. Each owl has its own unique hoot. Our barn owl, they have a few different hoots that you can hear and noises. They have up to 16 different hoots and noises that have been noted, but their actual hoot is less of a hoot and more of a scream. A long time ago, they got the name the ghost-faced owls because of their call, because many people would hear these animals screaming in the woods, and it really truly does sound like someone's getting stabbed in the woods and they're crying out for help. It is a very piercing, harrowing scream, and folks thought that many places that had barn owls, the woods there were haunted because they sound like screaming banshees. So they have an incredible sounding hoot. I encourage you all to look up a YouTube video of a barn owl scream, and if you were walking along the woods at night, you probably would pick up your pace to get home if you heard it. So these animals, you really can't tell the difference between males and females other than by size. Usually in the bird world, the raptors at least, the females will be about 1/3 larger than the males. The males come in roughly around 450 to 470 grams. The females are in the 520 to 530 gram range. So a little bit larger. The reason we have this is because the females need that extra room to be able to form and lay eggs. All right, so these animals, if you guys want to, again, just get a good look at their coloration, they have this really gorgeous tawny coloration here. Some folks think that you are able to tell the difference between the males because the females are actually a little bit darker and heavily spotted on their chest. He does have some speckling and spots on his chest here, But that has not been proved quite yet. It's more anecdotal than anything. I'll see if I can get my camera to focus in there and see those spots. But other than size, unless you watch the animal lay the egg, you really won't be able to tell out in the wild if this is a male or female barn owl. Now I'll keep him out while I take any questions you have. So I'll transition this back over to Jamie to read off any questions that might have been had about both of our farmland raptors.
Aaron, thank you so much. I love participating or being in the audience of your presentations. I always learn something new. Yeah, so any questions from the audience about the barn owl or the kestrel before we move further into the program? Don't be shy. Aaron, I think you just did such a great presentation. You answered all their questions.
Everything. I got everything. There's no question out there ever again. I think I've peaked as an educator, so it's just downhill now.
All right. But truly, such fabulous presentations, Aaron. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you again. I'm glad I was able to do this, and I hope this inspired some of you all to look at your property and say, I bet I could get a kestrel box out there. But again, thank you all for joining me tonight. I hope you guys really enjoyed these two animals. I know they're two very incredible species here in Pennsylvania.
Aaron, we do have a question coming in. How did you know the kestrel couldn't hunt for his own food when you were talking about him being imprinted?
Yeah, so he probably could get a few things, but the thing with an imprint animal is we think of that in their developmental years when they're still fledglings. They need that exposure with their parents to watch their parents hunt, how they fly, how they grab food, how they use their beak. And our kestrel, he didn't have that opportunity. He was being raised by humans at that point of his life. So he truly only understood, oh, you know what? Food will come from these humans. So there is a slight possibility he would be able to hunt food, but it's not a big enough possibility that we would ever be comfortable saying, get this animal back out into the wild. So unfortunately, he probably just wouldn't make it out in the wild again. So that's why we do have him as an education animal.
Aaron, we have another question. Why is the barn owl in captivity?
He is the same reason he was an imprinted animal. He is a little more nervous than our kestrel is. So that's why you might have seen him moving around. I know I mentioned they're very cautious species, but the same reason we did have him come into us as an imprinted bird. So he's just a little bit more comfortable around people. And he doesn't really have that fear of people, which is also a very big factor in wildlife. You really don't want to think about having a barn owl landing on the top of your head because you are wearing a beanie with a pom-pom kind of thing. And you can see he's got these incredible talons right here that they're going to utilize. So quite strong feet, and that can lead to quite a few injuries in humans. So wildlife not having a fear of humans is a very, very bad thing for everyone involved.
Yeah, thank you. And I would just like to add one thing too. With them being non-releasable because they're imprint, that actually is determined not by Hawk Mountain, but it's determined by a veterinarian that is the one that makes that determination. You know what? I'm not comfortable that this animal will survive in the wild because it's imprinted. And then they start looking for a place like Hawk Mountain for them to live. Okay, so we have another question. Are there any other species?
Awesome.
Are there any other species of owls that might not migrate?
That might not migrate. You definitely have quite a few species in Pennsylvania that might hang around. Great horned owls, for example, that's one that they have a large enough body that they can hold on to fat reserves very well, which many birds can't do. But our great horned owls actually have fat reserves that help them through the winter. Even our screech owls, our little tiny screech owls, these animals might stay in Pennsylvania through the winter so long as they can establish some sort of cavity through the winter. If they can find that cavity, they'll hang around. So we have those two species that will stay in Pennsylvania. Kind of the reverse of an animal coming to migrate down here are our snowy owls. We actually do get snowy owls every once in a while. We're in their southernmost area of their migration range. So they might pop in, hang around a little bit, and then be like, it's way too warm here, I'm out of here, which is kind of weird to think about February being warm in Pennsylvania for anybody.
Everything's relative, I guess, right, Aaron?
Exactly.
Okay, we have some more questions coming in. Can a barn owl or kestrel survive on a farm planted with monocrops, not grassland?
It gets, like I mentioned, it does bring that biodiversity down. If you do see that you have a lot of insects, you have a lot of prey species for them, you would be able to have an animal live there. It really just depends on what rodents and what insects you do have in that area. And the birds might determine that. They're not going to stay in that area. If they can't find their food, they're like, I'm out of here. So they won't just stay there and starve. So I always tell folks, if you're worried about that, it's always nice to just try putting up a nest box. And that at least provides habitat for some animal if it's not going to be a barn owl or a kestrel. But a lot of times the birds kind of make that decision. They say, I'm not finding the food that I want. I'm gonna head out.
Thank you. All right, we have a fantastic question coming up from an awesome person named Derek. Hi, Derek. How many owlets will survive in the wild? So owlets is the specific term for a baby owl, and I encourage everyone in the audience to integrate the word owlet into a conversation tomorrow.
Exactly. So we hope to see that that we can get as many owlets of our barn owls as we can, and that number would be up to 11 owlets. However, when these animals breed, once they start having more and more young, their likelihood of success goes down more and more and more. These animals are not monogamous animals, so the males might take up 2 female mates if there's enough food for him, because dad does all of the hunting in the barn owl world. And when he's going out, you got to think about, he could, if they both clutches have 5 owlets in them, he's then hunting for up to 12 individuals, including himself. So he would have a lot of work to do. But if there's enough food, hopefully we can have over 5 owlets succeed in a barn owl clutch.
Thanks, Aaron.
Of course.
How large of a field is suitable for the American kestrel?
You know, it kind of, there's been some variation in that answer. There's a lot of factors that will affect that. You know, proximity to different environment types. So if you have a large farmland, but you're right up against something like state game land, let's say, that area might help them out. But I know that around over 10 acres of land, 50 being ideal, is kind of what you're looking at to really have a successful clutch of kestrels over and over again.
Thanks. And that might be all the questions for now. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the other Farmland Raptors and how everyone can get involved in our Farmland Raptor project. But if people have more questions, just keep putting them in the Q&A and we'll get to them at the end. So Aaron, thank you so much. Are you going to put your coworker away?
I am. I'm going to get this young man back home and tucked into bed. So, but thank you all once again. I hope you all enjoyed the live animal and my component for this program. And I'll turn it over to Jamie, who has really awesome information about our Farmland Raptor project. So good night, everyone, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Aaron. Bye. All right, so we just saw 2 of our 4 Farmland Raptor species. What do I see over here? Oh my goodness, could it be? Is it a Northern Harrier? So I just wanted to show you, you know, when they're in flight, a prominent field markers, they have a large white rump patch that you can see. So here's the Harrier. And what else could we have? What could I see? We have here a short-eared owl, just so you can get a look to see what they look like. All right, so those are the 4 species. So I'm going to work on sharing my screen just to tell you a little bit more about Hawk Mountain's Farmland Raptor Project. Okay. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so these 4 species, the farmland raptors, we just learned a lot about them from Erin. And, you know, as we've learned, due to habitat loss, increased development, changes in farming practices, and increased use of pesticides that decrease prey numbers and poison predators, grassland raptors like the barn owl, American kestrel, short-eared owl, and northern harrier have been in severe population decline over the past 2 decades. The American kestrels are declining, as we know, and short-eared owls are endangered in Pennsylvania and uncommon across the rest of the country. The barn owl is near threatened and listed as a species of greatest conservation need in Pennsylvania. There are about 60 to 70 confirmed active nests annually, with about 30 or more undocumented nests estimated. And the northern harrier is of special concern in Pennsylvania, with shrinking wetlands and open fields, among other dangers, causing their decline. So it's very clear that these raptors really need our help in protection. So the Farmland Raptor Project. So Hawk Mountain, we are working with local landowners to try to save these species. And if you think about it, and you think about all the private landowners in Pennsylvania, in our country, in the world, that constitutes such a huge portion of land, so much bigger than any, you know, reserve land. So it's so important, the collective power of individual landowners for conservation of these raptors and wildlife in general. It's a huge opportunity for people to step up and help protect these awesome birds. And they in turn are helping us by providing a totally organic and effective natural form of pest control. So another amazing opportunity is the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, which is part of the Pennsylvania Farmland Raptor Project. So if you have this type of habitat that's good for these farmland raptors, grasslands, meadows, open fields, the government will actually pay you money to preserve this habitat. That sounds great to me, right? And we have lots of information on our website under our science tab, and then under Farmland Raptors, you can find out how you can apply to receive financial aid to help preserve this awesome habitat for these birds. So our Farmland Raptor Project is all about collaboration, working with local people and engaging people to become citizen scientists to really protect these birds. And it's all about preserving habitat, preserving the fields, the grasslands, and also enhancing habitat by providing nesting areas. And as we learned from Erin, we have the kestrel and the barn owl that will utilize man-made structures such as nest boxes for nesting, and we can help support these species by erecting nest boxes. And the other 2 species, the harrier and the short-eared owls, they actually will nest on the ground. So just by leaving open areas of grassland for them to nest in, it can really make a huge difference for these populations. Another important thing to protect these birds, we need to learn more about them. We need to learn, where are they living? How many of them are out there? We need to better understand it. And we need help from everyone out there. You can be a citizen scientist and you can report a sighting. If you see one of these species, you can go online to our website, and I can show you later how to do that. And it's really easy under the Farmland Raptor Project tab. And it's just the online sighting form. You fill out as much information as you know about the location, and that can really help our scientists learn more about the population distribution of these birds. So thanks to collaboration with over 400 interested local farmers, landowners, and volunteers, we had over 276 sightings of farmland raptors just last year alone, and that's awesome. Also through project and sites such as Shavers Creek Environmental Center, which is one of our partners, we have funded dozens of barn owl and kestrel nest boxes. We also work with 4 school districts to provide opportunities through agricultural education for students to build nest boxes and learn about raptor monitoring. So looking ahead to the future, as more sightings of these raptors are reported, conservationists can paint a more well-rounded picture of the state of Pennsylvania's grassland ecosystem. And these numbers will help us at Hawk Mountain to fine-tune our conservation strategy and help these birds and hopefully increase their populations to return back to normal levels. And we continue to spread awareness to Pennsylvania landowners and encourage that those with favorable habitat on their property to please consider setting aside untouched grassland, as Erin had mentioned, maybe like not mowing, and setting up nest boxes for raptors. And you got to see how beautiful the kestrel are and the barn owl with our live ambassadors. And wouldn't you like to see that on your property? How amazing would that be? So there's so many things you can do to help. As I mentioned, you can report sightings so we can better understand their distribution. You can help improve or enhance habitat to encourage nesting. You can build a nest box for owls or kestrels, and we have directions how to do that on our website and lots of resources. Just contact us if you want brochures and directions how to do that. Maintain an area of untouched grassland to provide nesting sites for the short-eared owls and the northern harriers, and encourage other landowners to join in on the project. And another big thing, as Erin mentioned, stop using rodenticides or any sort of poison, because that doesn't just poison the mouse or the rodent, it poisons all the levels of the food web. So this is just an example. This is something I just pulled from our website, kestrel nest box plans. It's easy to construct. And you know what? You can also purchase them at a Hawk Mountain's gift shop. So here are some tips. You know, if you have suitable habitat and you're going to put up a kestrel nest box. So as Erin taught us, kestrels love to hunt in open habitats. So generally, when you're putting up a nest box, you want there to be at least 1 acre of land, of open space around you with short vegetation. So that's really what you're looking for to erect a nest box for a kestrel. They can be somewhat tolerant of human activity, but if you have an opportunity to place it in an area where there's less human activity, that would most likely be preferred by the kestrel. Other good locations: large isolated trees in the middle or along the perimeter of a field, barns or outbuildings with a large open view for hunting, tall poles, utility poles that's surrounded by open habitat, orchards surrounded by open fields, or open areas where small mammals are common and natural cavities are few. Okay, so tips for successfully placing your nest box. You want it to be 15 to 20 feet from the ground. So that's high enough to keep out like other predators or other casual visitors, but yet it's not too high that you can still reach it with an extension ladder. The front of the box should be clearly visible from a distance, and you want to make sure that the box is surrounded at least by 1 acre of open space. You want to orient the box so that it faces away from the roadside if possible. And the kestrels do seem to prefer nest boxes that are mounted on a barn, if that's possible. And if you have a lot of property or you're placing multiple nest boxes, you want to space them at least half a mile apart so they're not overlapping with their territories. And also you want to place nest boxes at least 50 yards from the wooded areas, and that can help deter squirrels from trying to go in and enter and utilize the nest box for themselves. And the best time to erect the nest box is going to be in late February, and that's plenty of time before the kestrels start establishing their nesting territories in mid-March, and then they'll start breeding later on, as Erin was saying. All right, so now tips for barn owl nest boxes. So they're a bit bigger than the kestrel nest box. They can be mounted on the inside or outside of a barn or grain silo, or placed on a tall tree, post, or other sturdy structure. Abandoned buildings work best as they offer minimal disturbance during the breeding season. And again, these boxes should be placed at least 20 feet above the ground, whereas the kestrel was 15 to 20, the barn owl is at least 20. The box opening should face an adjacent field for foraging and hunting. And the barn owls tend to prefer habitat that's a mixture of tall vegetation, such as warm and cool season grasses that have not been recently mowed. So if you're looking for an excuse to do less yard work or less farm work, just stop the mowing. Okay, and get involved. If you see a farmland raptor anywhere, we want to know about it. We need your help. So this is just one of our web pages from an extension from our Farmland Raptor Project webpage, and it's like raptor sighting. You click on it, and it's really self-guided. You just enter as much information as you know. You do not need to know everything in there, but just fill it out as much as you can, and this can really, really help us. So we encourage you to do that. And isn't it cool to know that you're being involved in collecting scientific data for a conservation research project? I think that's pretty cool. And I think this is probably my last one. So let's see, I actually have here with me a real kestrel nest box to show you, just so you get a picture of how big it is. Ugh. So you can see they're pretty big. Great holiday gifts. It's the gift that keeps on giving, and what a fun project for friends or family to kind of, you know, help a species survive that then is helping us in turn. So we do sell these at our gift shop as well. And going back to the barn owl nest boxes, the Pennsylvania Game Commission also has a lot of wonderful information and resources on their website about barn owl nest boxes, how to construct them, and how to place them as well. So with that being said, are there any questions? Any other questions about Farmland Raptor Project, or just in general about the program or any of the birds we've seen? I know we had a lot of questions earlier, which is great. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And sincerely from my heart, thank you for caring about Farmland Raptors. It means the world to us. And you really, truly can make a difference for these birds. So please get involved. And especially if you live in an area that looks something like this, please help protect that habitat. And because we want to see where these guys are. So please let us know, and let us know when you see them on our website. So as always, we like to close our webinars with letting you know what upcoming programs we have going on at Hawk Mountain. We still are in migration season, so we're still having birds fly through, so please come and join us. This Saturday is actually our autumn open house, and we have lots of wonderful activities going on all day. We have refreshments, programs for kids, programs for adults. And also we have a Lenape Lifeways program from the Native American Heritage Association, and that's at 1 o'clock. On this Sunday, we have Make the Holidays Boilo, some local culture there, all about Boilo. And on the 25th, the day after Thanksgiving, we have our annual Opt Outside hike on our River of Rocks Trail. Our next stay-at-home speaker series is December 1st, and that's Turkey Vultures, Love at Second Sight with Dr. Dan Barlin. On December 4th, we have a Christmas wall basket weaving workshop. And December 7th, we have a Wee Ones Walk, Winter Critters, and then December 11th, a Welcome Winter Hike. And in January, we have our annual Wilderness First Responder courses and Wilderness First Responder recertification courses. I also like to let everyone know that Hawk Mountain has an IDEA fund, and IDEA stands for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility. So if anyone is interested in visiting Hawk Mountain and you fall under the umbrella of IDEA or your organization, or you would like an education program, either on-site or off-site, please contact us about that IDEA fund, because we'd love to work with you. And just want to thank you all so much. And I hope to see you at Hawk Mountain sometime soon. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye for now.